Hello everybody, welcome back to Valley of the Mist Block of the Month for 2022. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And this year, it's the start of the year, so Happy New Year. We've got a little bit of a difference this year. We have a new focus fabric, and our quilt blocks that we're making this year are all going to be star blocks. So they're going to be improvisational stars, as close to improvisational as we can make star blocks. Our first block of the year is a 5-pointed star, which you can see right there. Shelley is going to go over fabrics, and I think in this one you'll go over, this will be kind of the fabrics you need kind of for the whole year.
Right.
Probably, yeah. Okay, so let's show them what they need.
Okay, first, this is our focus fabric for this year, a black focus fabric.
Right, and for those of you in the Quilt Guild, we will have these for sale at the meeting in January.
Okay, and for each of the blocks for this month, each of the 4 colors you're going to have are the same size, and they're 8.5-inch squares. So the first one, of course, is the focus fabric. Then you'll need a white, and then 2 coordinating colors. Now there's lots of colors.
Yeah, lots of colors.
There's lots of colors in here.
You are going to kind of be forced to pick kind of bright colors, but you know, it's what we like.
Yes.
So you get stuck with what we like.
Right.
Anyway, so for this block, and probably in general for the year, but definitely for this block, you really want these fabrics to contrast with each other, because I don't know if you noticed, but in you can see that each color ends up next to one of the others. And in this block, we're using these 8.5-inch square, and you're going to use the same amount of each fabric. So it's not like you can play down one of the fabrics. They're all going to be equally used. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, the other thing that makes it a little bit easier with this block is if you don't use batiks or something that doesn't really show the back and front easily. Now, actually, I am using one. My green fabric that you can see right here is a solid, and so it's the same on either side. It just makes it a little bit, you have to pay a little more attention to what you're doing to make sure you're sewing the right sides together. Okay, so
I want to mention only one other thing that has to do with our year. We aren't saying every month is necessarily 2 coordinating fabrics. It might not be.
Right, actually, you might want to set aside even up to 6 coordinating fabrics. We don't know for sure how many you're going to need for the whole year, but definitely in some months you need 3 or 4. So if you like variety in your quilt, then it'd be a good idea. And if you don't like this focus fabric, that's fine. Pick one that you like. But if you're going to participate in the block exchange with the guild meetings, then you need to use this focus fabric, because everyone's going to have that in their blocks. And by the way, these blocks are due at the February meeting. Okay, so the first thing you need to do, Shelley's got a picture, got a stack of them right there. The first thing you need to do is take your 4 fabrics and find some sort of sticker and number them 1, 2, 3, 4, because we're going to call them fabric 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter the order. Put them in any order you like, but that order, every time after we make a cut and sew it back on, you are going to stack them in that same order. And I want you to put that sticker right in the middle of the block, because the only tricky thing with this block is that we have this stack, and after every cut and re-sew back on, you're going to stack them back up nearly as you can into a nice neat stack of 4 pieces, and with number 1 on top, obviously, and you're going to cut them, and that part of the stack that has the sticker on it, right in the center, it doesn't move. You keep those in that same order, but the other stack, the one that you're going to cut off, and you'll see in just a second, you take the top fabric and you move it to the bottom of the stack. And then you're going to sew back on those, the top one of each stack now, but it'll be a new fabric. And it's kind of interesting the way it works, because the way we make these cuts, as you can see, they don't really move a lot. You end up with a center color, and then all of the legs are another color, and then the outside is a third color. But and so you have to do it right, and if you have them in the wrong order, you'll get kind of a wacky, all mixed up colors.
Right.
And you know what? That's even okay. It's just not the version of this block that we're doing. And I think we would both encourage you to try, like Shelley tried one where she moved the block, the pieces to fabrics.
Right.
And then you do get a much more
right.
wacky look. And it's really cute. It's not as defined a looking as a 5-point star. This makes the 5-point star just pop out. Okay.
I don't think you need to arrange your 4
That's at
fabrics
the
in a
end.
certain order.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Because it's going to be hard for you to know. You're thinking, oh, I can't tell what part's going to be the star. But you know that's kind of the magic of the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. It will come out if you do them as we tell you, and you just keep moving one block. You will have, like I said, all the points will be one color, the center will be a color, and then the outer will be another color. Okay. So the first thing you have to do is, and hopefully you can see here, and Shelley can kind of point. Why don't you just have one square up there?
Oh, okay.
And kind of draw with your finger. But basically, you're going to take your ruler and you're going to set it roughly in the middle at the top of one side of the square. And they're all stacked pretty much, right on top of each other. And then this bottom corner, I want it about a 1/2 inch in from the edge. Okay, and you have to do that so that when you sew it back on, you have some edge there to sew onto. We don't want it all the way into the corner.
Okay, and you definitely should have the written instructions to make it so you can see the pictures of which corner you're going to. Because it's
right.
Which corner.
And well, yeah, actually we have a new person helping us this year on the website. So I know last year I was putting the instructions into the YouTube video, but I couldn't put photos in there. So hopefully you can find it easily on the Quilt Guild's website, the instructions with the photos. Okay, so I've got 4 pieces stacked up here. You can see my label is underneath the ruler. I've lined this up. I eyeballed about a 1/2 inch in, roughly the middle. And now I'm just gonna cut that off.
Here to here.
So now I have a stack of my 4 pieces with the sticker and the 4 pieces that I just cut off. So I take this top one, set it on the bottom, and now we're gonna go and we're gonna sew these back on. And the only tricky thing when you're sewing these back on, and these are a little bit oversized, you do lose, because of the seams, you're gonna lose out of this 8.5 inch piece. But when you sew them back on, you wanna take that top corner of this triangle piece, and you're gonna stick it up above that edge about 1/4 inch, okay? And that allows it to kind of come back right into the square. So the bottom will be up about 1/4 inch, and the top will be up, and it'll sew on just nice. All right, so we're gonna sew those on. I want you to press them to, let me look. We press the seams open.
Right.
Yes, I almost forgot, that is important. There's a lot of seams that come together here. So unfortunately, you do need to press them open. Okay, so we'll see you back with our first square, our first
4
cut sewn back on.
Right.
Okay, so you can see Shelley has one of hers up there showing how she's sewn it back on. The other thing that I just want to mention really briefly before we go on to the next cut is that for those of you that haven't had to do a lot where you press a seam open in quilting, there are a couple of little tricks to make it easier. And the main thing is to press it on a curve, a small curve. Okay, and there's a couple of tools that will help you do that, and you might just have them, or you can just find something that is can take the heat.
Right.
But like this thing, which actually sometimes I use both of these when pressing. Okay, so this is a little gadget that we went to another workshop, and they were selling these, and basically it's a stick. It's just part of a yardstick with some batting.
It's a half round.
Oh, a half round. Oh, a half round. Okay, with maybe a piece of batting to cushion it and fabric over it, and so it's finished. So if you had a piece of molding in your house that was like a half round that's unpainted and wood and can take the heat, you can use that. It'll be fine. This one rolls a little bit, but the base of this is silicone, and you can just use that to put it underneath the edge, and it kind of, what it does is it pops the seam up a little bit, so all your pressing is on the seam, and then you can actually even get the tip of the iron in along it. And sometimes if I do this, and I can open it up with this, and then I don't even burn my fingers.
Right.
Okay, so that's just a little handy tip for the pressing. Okay, so now let's move on to cut number 2. So we've done one side of the star, and now we're going to do the other side. And basically, I'm going to take the ruler, and I've got them neatly stacked again. See, number 1's on top. You have to trust me that they're in order. And I'm going to go a little bit past the seam that we just made, half inch or so. Give yourself some room for to not have to sew right on that seam. And then I'm going to, at the bottom, I'm going to move it over a little bit. And I'm going to, I need to be about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in from that edge. So I'm going to move this over a little bit so that I can cut with my right hand. Oh, that looks good, I think. And then I just make that cut. Unfortunately, you do have to cut through 4 layers of fabric. I don't have my 60mm rotary cutter. That, if you have one, it definitely makes it easier, because you want the same cut on all 4 pieces. Okay, so I've got the cut. Now I'm going to take, and it's kind of funny, you can see why this happens, because now, you know, I haven't touched this fabric, and so when I move it to the bottom, you can see that my focus fabric pops right up against it, and now I'm going to sew those two together. Okay, so sew these back on, kind of follow the same rules of placing that, when you fold it over, put that upper triangle up a little bit so it lines up good, and press the seams open, and we'll be right back. Okay, so you can see Shelly has done hers where she's added that other side back on. So now cut number 3 is like the bottom 2/3 on the right corner, bottom right corner is what we're taking off, right? So basically you're going to take your ruler and you're going to set it about 1/3 of the way down on the right side, and then you're going to put it so it intersects that bottom corner right in between the seam that you just sewed on and that corner. Does that make sense, Shelley?
I think so.
Okay, so about 1/3 of the way. You know, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be accurate, just eyeball it. Oh, what's going on? Cut that off. Let's see, did I cut it? Of course, something didn't cut. Right there, okay. All right, so now we're gonna do the same thing. Move this top one down, and come on. Move that top one down. Oh, see, now it's revealing what's gonna be my outer.
Right.
Maybe.
I think that's right.
We'll see, because I think the legs are gonna be the black.
I think
yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, it's very confusing because you think you know what's going on and then it changes. Okay, so let's sew those on and we'll be right back. Okay, so we've sewn that piece on, and I did forget to mention before we went away to sew them on that starting now, you don't have to adjust that point above the edge. It will actually line up better if you do move it up, but it starts getting shorter on the bottom because you're cutting off. So, you know, it's a tough call.
Right.
Shelley did not. She just centered her piece on the block, and you can see that it doesn't intersect exactly right. I did the same thing as her, except for on one of mine, I did play with moving it a little bit, and it intersects better.
Because I don't think in the long run it's going to matter a lot, because some other ones, there's no way you're going to get them perfect
right.
anyway.
I mean, that's
so.
kind of the charm of this
Yeah.
block, is it looking kind of like a very, very rustic five-pointed star. I wanted to point out, so now this next piece that we're cutting, it's like the opposite lower leg, and it's going to make you're making this point. I don't want Shelley to show, because Shelley turned her stars all around on her block. I kept mine oriented the same. So you're going to go down about a third from the left side now, third of the way down, and about an inch up from that bottom corner. You could go up higher, like an inch and a half, but that starts making this leg really little. And like Shelley's block, you can see she's got some very little points on hers. And we were experimenting at that time, and we didn't really understand, you know, what the cut did. But I can kind of see when I lay this on here, okay, this leg is going to be like that, but I'm even going to lose a little more because of the seam allowance. So if I bring this down, you know, to barely an inch above that edge, which is fine, then you're going to have a bigger leg. Now,
this is the leg right here.
Right. Now, the other thing, I mean, I would not skimp on coming down that third. I would even come down a little bit, because that defines your top point, because you're going to make, our next cut's going to cut off that top. And so if you haven't come down enough here, you're going to have a very tiny little top point. Okay, so I'm going to make this cut. And it does get hard at this point. Now we have all these stacked seams. It's harder to align these, and I can see mine has moved. You know, you do kind of want to pick a corner or two and really try to make them behave and stack up.
There is some extra, so you should be all right. Just
you should.
As close as you can.
Okay, so cut that off, and now we're going to go. So those, this one, I think we do tell you in the instructions to as I stack this, to watch as you place this over this is going to become a pentagon eventually. And when you place that on there, try to center that, or else it really won't look like a star.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Try to put your points so they line up with the center, kind of.
Yeah, try to take the two different seam allowances, and you know, you're going to be off by a quarter inch, but you kind of want to get that leg right there in the middle. Okay? All right, we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so we have almost done all of our cutting.
Yes.
Now we're going to make the top point. And to do that, I want you on this one in particular to line, when you're arranging these in your stack, arrange them from the bottom edge. Line that up. Okay, the top edge is going to start getting weird. But for this cut, we're going to take our ruler and we're going to put it just below where the points meet on the prior two legs. So if you try to arrange from the top, you might not get that. Okay, so I'm going to turn this just to make it easier for me to cut. So I'm under those points, and now I can kind of see through my ruler how big these star points are going to be, and so I'm happy with that. Obviously, you can only see it on the top block. Whack that off.
It does get harder because it's bumpier now.
Yeah, it is definitely bumpier. Okay, so on this one, kind of do the same thing where you're when you're lining it up, just try to look see that that this star point is kind of going into centering on that pentagon. Okay, and we'll be right back because I lied. There was a little bit more cutting, which we will tell you about next. Okay? Okay, so now you have all 4 of your star blocks. And the next step, well, before we even get to the next step, I'm going to talk a little bit. So this block is kind of a cool block if you want to make a quilt with just these blocks. And the rule of thumb for how to decide how much fabric you need is that whatever you want, whatever size you need this block to be, and because our blocks are 12.5 inches when you turn them in to make a finished 12-inch square block, we need 4 6.5-inch squares to make up that block. So all you do is add 2 inches to that size. We wanted them to be 6.5, so we made them 8.5. And that does assume you're going to use a pretty accurate 1/4 inch. If you are not good with your 1/4 inch, then you do need to start with a little bit bigger block.
Maybe a 1/4 inch bigger or something, maybe.
Yeah, not a lot bigger, a little bit bigger. And you're going to see now for this next step, what we want you to do is you need to decide how you want your finished block to look, and actually, Shelley, grab your block too. As you can see, I did mine very symmetrical. I had my stars oriented the same. And Shelley didn't. And you know, the good, it bothers me, but the good thing about that is really when you place it on a quilt, you don't know what direction it's going to be. Right. So hers is right no matter what direction.
That's what I was thinking.
That's what she was thinking.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad plan. And I may do that with this one.
Okay.
It'll kill me, but I'll do it. But okay, so now we want you to take your 4 blocks and turn them however you want, arrange them how you want, but you need to find out what your 4 inner corners are, because we want you to take, these blocks need to be 6.5-inch square, but we know some of them, because of how this sews, might come up a little bit. It generally where you run into trouble is on the width of the block. It may be a little less wide.
Right.
So we want you to look at that, put a 6.5-inch ruler on your block, and after you figure out what the inner seams are for that block, we want you to trim them, even, so you have a nice straight edge. Now this block, this one of mine is fine, but some of mine were a little narrower. You can even see at the bottom, it's barely bigger. But so say I'm going to trim these 2 edges. I'm going to trim off the bare minimum, making sure that my points are all at least 1/4 inch from the edge so that I don't lose a point when I sew on the seam. And I'm going to leave the outer 2 edges bigger so that I have some extra fabric. So when we finally put the 4 together and you're going to make your final block, you've got some extra and you can play with your ruler and make sure. So don't worry right now that you're like, oh, this one's too little. Think about that when you're placing it and try to place it so that another one might offset that, like right. Even by turning it so it's not always on the width.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
All right. So we're going to go away. We're going to trim those 2 edges and sew our 4 blocks together. And the sewing of them together is simple. Just sew 2 to 2 and then the top, and then press that seam opposite ways. You don't have to press this seam open. And then sew the top and bottom together and press it. Right. And then we'll look at them, and I guess like normal we'll come back with one of ours trimmed and one of them not. Okay? So we'll see you in a minute. Okay, so we're back and we have our finished blocks. There were a couple of things that I want to mention. Number 1, I was wrong. You do need to continue to press open the seams. You will find that out when you sew it together. There's just too many seams coming together, right. So just keep pressing them open. When you're looking at your little blocks, and you might be concerned with those weird little intersection where these outer, trying to find like here where they come together and they look funny because they have a different fabric in there. don't really be worried about them. They pretty much all get cut off, or they'll end up in the seam allowance when the block gets sewn to the next one. Very, if anything shows, it should be a tiny bit. Like I'm looking at Shelley's original block, and that purple down there might have a tiny bit showing, but
it'd be once I sew, so you can see it. Once I sew it in, it'll be a teeny piece.
Don't worry about it. Okay, so I did like Shelley did with her first block, and I turned mine. Of course, you know, Shelley was laughing because I turned them symmetrically, but you know, it's still. So I'm very happy with how my block turned out. I did have one piece that was just barely 6.5 when I trimmed it, but because I had turned it and it matched with another one, I had plenty to cut off. I had plenty to trim. So mine is all trimmed. Shelley's isn't. She'll show you what she's got. She's got her 12.5-inch ruler there.
I got plenty. And another thing is, if yours did come out small on one and large on the other, you know, it doesn't have to be like a.
Yeah, you don't have to put the center of the ruler in the center. You just need a 12.5-inch block.
Yeah.
All right, so this is our start to the year with this wonky 5-pointed star, and I hope you plan on joining us for the entire year.
Right.
And we'll see you at the guild meeting.